The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the air. A clean, hopeful scent that I breathed in like a promise. It was the smell of new beginnings. I stood in the middle of the room that would soon be a nursery, my hand resting on the gentle curve of my belly where my son, Noah, was sleeping. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust motes as they danced in the air, turning them into tiny, glittering stars. The walls were a soft, pale yellow, the color of a happy morning. I had spent the last 2 weeks painting them myself. My world had become very small lately, and I loved it that way. It was the size of this 2-story house in a quiet Raleigh suburb, with its neat lawn and the sprawling oak tree in the backyard. It was the size of the garden I was tending, where the tomato plants were just starting to show fruit. And most importantly, it was the size of the future I was building. A future for me, for my husband Ben, and for our son. I picked up a fine-tipped brush, dipping it into a small pot of silver paint. On the wall opposite the crib, I was painting a mural, a gentle, smiling crescent moon surrounded by a spray of delicate stars. My hand was steady. A muscle memory from my old life, the one where I was Ms. Evans, the high school art teacher. I missed the kids sometimes, the chaotic energy of the classroom, but I had never for a second regretted my choice. When we found out I was pregnant, Ben and I had agreed I would take a break from work. I would focus on making our house a home. It was a role I slipped into with ease, with a joy that felt deep and true. My phone buzzed on the windowsill, playing the little chime I had set just for him. Ben. A smile spread across my face instantly. I carefully placed the brush down and wiped my hands on my paint-splattered overalls. Before answering the video call, his face filled the screen. Handsome and familiar, but tired. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper than I remembered. He was in his corporate apartment in Charlotte, the one the company paid for while he was managing this big construction project. The background was always the same, a beige wall, a generic piece of art. It was a place for sleeping, not for living. "Hey, you," I said, my voice warm. "How's my favorite husband?" He managed a smile. "Tired, but better now that I'm seeing my favorite girls." He always called me and my bump his girls, even though we knew it was a boy. It was our little joke. "He's a boy, remember?" I laughed, turning the phone around to show him my progress on the mural. "What do you think?" "The moon needs a little more shading, but the stars are almost done. It looks amazing." "Mia," he said, and I knew he meant it. But there was a slight delay in his voice, a distance that wasn't just the miles between Raleigh and Charlotte. His eyes seemed to be looking just past the screen. "You're so talented. Noah's going to love it." "I hope so," I said, turning the camera back to my face. I wanted to see him, to really look at him. "How was the meeting with the investors today?" "Long," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Really long. They're demanding. But it went well, I think. We're still on track." That's my Ben. Always getting it done. I tried to inject brightness into my voice, to send it through the screen and somehow reach him, to ease that weariness I saw etched on his face. "You'll be home Friday, right? Don't forget, we have that birthing class on Saturday morning." For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. A flash of, I wasn't sure, panic, annoyance. It was gone as quickly as it came. "Right. Friday. I'll do my best to get out of here at a decent time. Things are just crazy right now." "Mia, this project is a beast." "I know," I said softly. "I know you're working hard for us. We appreciate it so much. Noah and I were just talking about what a great dad you're going to be." He smiled again, but it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. "Yeah. How are you feeling? Is the back pain any better?" We fell into the familiar routine of our nightly calls. I told him about my day, the mural, the trip to the grocery store, the neighbor's dog that got loose. He listened, nodding, but his responses were short. "That's nice, honey." "Oh, wow. Sounds good." I felt like I was broadcasting my life into a void, and only a faint echo was coming back. I told myself it was just stress. This project in Charlotte was his big break, a chance to prove himself for a major promotion. He was a project manager, and this was the biggest project his company had ever trusted him with. The pressure must be immense. Living alone in a sterile apartment 5 days a week, eating takeout, working 14-hour days. Of course, he was tired. Of course, he was distant. He was doing this for us. The thought became a mantra, A little prayer I repeated to myself whenever the cold tendrils of doubt began to creep in. He's doing this for us. I should probably go, he said after about 15 minutes. I have to look over some blueprints for the morning. Okay, I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. Our calls used to last for an hour. We'd talk about everything and nothing. Now, they felt like a scheduled check-in. Another item on his to-do list. Get some rest. Ben, I love you. I love you too. Mia, more than anything. This time. His voice sounded sincere, and I clung to it. I clung to those words like a lifeline. The screen went dark, and I was left alone in the quiet nursery. The room suddenly felt bigger, emptier. The smiling moon on the wall seemed to be mocking me. I placed a hand back on my belly, feeling the gentle flutter of Noah turning inside me. It was okay. It would all be okay. Soon, the project would be over. Soon, Ben would be home for good. Soon, our baby would be here, and our real life, our perfect life, would finally begin. I just had to be patient. I just had to hold on. The next morning, I woke up feeling a renewed sense of purpose. I wouldn't let the loneliness of a short phone call overshadow the joy of my reality. The sun was bright, the air was warm, and my garden was waiting. I put on a wide-brimmed hat and my comfiest maternity dress and went outside. Gardening was my therapy. My hands in the soil, the scent of damp earth and green leaves, the simple, honest work of nurturing life grounded me. I weeded the patch around my zucchini plants and staked out the tomatoes that were getting heavy with green fruit. Everything out here was straightforward. You give a plant water, sunlight, and care, and it grows. There were no mixed signals, no hidden meanings. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a sweet woman in her 70s with a cloud of white hair, waved at me from over the fence. Looking good, Amelia, she called out, her voice cheerful. You have a real green thumb. Just trying my best. I called back with a smile. Ben says I spend more time talking to the plants than I do to him. It was a joke, but a bitter taste filled my mouth as soon as I said it. It was too close to the truth. I spent my days talking to the baby, the plants, the four walls of my house. As I worked, my mind drifted back to Ben. I remember the day we first saw this house. I was only a few weeks pregnant, and we were still terrified and excited. The house was a little dated, with shag carpeting and dark wood paneling. But we saw the potential. We saw the big backyard where our kids could play. We saw the extra bedroom that would be a perfect nursery. We can do this. Mia, Ben had said, wrapping his arms around me in the empty living room. We can make this our home. I'll work hard. I promise. I'll give you and this baby everything. He was keeping that promise. I knew he was. That apartment in Charlotte, the long hours, the stress, it was all part of the sacrifice. I felt a pang of guilt for my doubts the night before. He was shouldering all the financial burden while I got to stay home and paint murals and grow vegetables. He was the one who was really lonely. I was the one being selfish, resolved to be a better, more supportive wife. I spent the rest of the day making his favorite meal, a slow-cooked beef stew, so he could have a good, home-cooked dinner when he got back for the weekend. I packed it up carefully into containers to put in the freezer. It was a small gesture, but it was all I could do from 160 miles away. That evening, I waited for his call. 7 o'clock came and went, then 8. By 9, a knot of anxiety was tightening in my stomach. This was unusual, even on his busiest nights. He always called. I texted him, "Everything okay?" No reply. I tried to rationalize. His phone probably died. He was in a late meeting and couldn't step away. He fell asleep early from sheer exhaustion. I ran through every plausible scenario, anything to avoid the one that was lurking in the dark corners of my mind. Finally, at almost 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was him. I snatched it up, a mixture of relief and irritation washing over me. "Ben, I was worried. Is everything okay?" Yeah. I'm sorry. "Mia," he said. He sounded breathless, distracted. I could hear noises in the background music, the low chatter of other people. It didn't sound like an office. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "It sounds loud." "Oh, a few of us from the team just went out for a quick dinner," he said. "The investors were in town, and my boss kind of insisted. It was a networking thing. I'm sorry I didn't call earlier. It was all very last minute. A dinner. With his team. It made sense. But why did it feel like a lie? Why did my heart start beating a little faster? Oh, okay, I said. Well, I'm glad you got to relax a little. You must have been exhausted. I was proud of how calm I sounded. Supportive. Understanding. Yeah. It was nice, he said. But his voice was distant again, as if he were speaking to me while his attention was somewhere else entirely. Listen. I should go. It's loud in here. I'll call you tomorrow on my lunch break. Okay. Okay. Ben. Love you. The words were rushed. I love you too, I whispered. But he had already hung up. I stood in the silent kitchen, the scent of the beef stew I had so lovingly prepared now seeming to mock me from the freezer. I put my phone down on the counter and stared at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. A pregnant woman. Her face pale with a nameless fear. I saw the overbright colors of the nursery reflected behind me. My perfect world. My beautiful, carefully painted, perfect world. And for the first time, I saw a crack running right through the middle of it. A tiny hairline fracture that I was suddenly terrified might be too big to fix. The next few days, I lived in a state of determined optimism. I told myself that the strange phone call was a product of my own hormonal anxiety. Pregnancy did strange things to a person. Everyone said so. It made you sensitive, prone to worry. I was probably overthinking everything. Ben was working hard. I needed to be a supportive partner, not a suspicious one. So, I threw myself into my routine with an almost frantic energy. I finished the mural, adding a final, shimmering coat to the silver stars until they seemed to twinkle. I organized every closet. I scrubbed floors that were already clean. I was building a fortress of domestic perfection, as if a tidy house could somehow tidy my anxious mind. When Friday arrived, I was buzzing with anticipation. He was coming home. Everything would feel normal again once he was here. Standing in the kitchen, his arms wrapped around me, his familiar scent of sawdust and clean laundry soap filling my senses. The distance would collapse. The doubts would evaporate. He had left a small pile of laundry from his last weekend home, and I decided to wash it so everything would be fresh for him. As I sorted the lights from the darks, I picked out the jacket he'd worn to travel back to Charlotte on Monday. It was a simple canvas work jacket. I checked the pockets out of habit, a routine search for forgotten receipts or loose change. My fingers closed around a crumpled piece of paper in the breast pocket. I pulled it out, smoothing it on the lid of the washing machine. It was a receipt. My eye scanned the details. The name of the restaurant was printed at the top in an elegant, looping script, the Gilded Sparrow. I'd never heard of it. Below that was the address, in Charlotte. And then the date, Tuesday evening. The very night he had called me late. The night he said his team had gone out for a quick dinner because the boss insisted. My breath caught in my throat. I read further. The list of items was short but specific. 2 orders of the pan-seared scallops, a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, 2 desserts, the chocolate lava cake. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a quick team dinner. This was an intimate, expensive meal for 2. The total at the bottom made my eyes water. It was more than we spent on groceries in 2 weeks. My mind raced, trying to find an explanation. Any explanation. That made sense. He was with a client, a very important client. He had to entertain them. But why would he lie about it? Why say it was a group thing with his boss? Why sound so secretive? The pieces didn't fit. They rattled around in my head, creating a terrible, discordant noise. I sank down onto the small stool in the laundry room, the receipt trembling in my hand. The hum of the washing machine filled the silence, a mundane sound in a world that had just tilted on its axis. I couldn't wait until he got home. I couldn't sit with this coiled snake of a secret in my stomach for another 5 hours. My hands felt cold as I picked up my phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful, oblivious. Hey, Mia. I was just about to call you. I'm packing up now. Should be on the road in an hour. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Hey, listen. A weird thing. I was doing your laundry, and I found a receipt in your jacket pocket. There was a pause on the other end. A tiny, fractional silence that felt 100 years long. Oh yeah, he said, his voice a little too casual. What for? A restaurant in Charlotte. The Gilded Sparrow. I said the name, and it felt like a curse on my tongue. From Tuesday night. It looked expensive. The silence was longer this time. I could hear him breathing. I could picture him, standing in that beige apartment, his mind scrambling. Oh, right. That. Yeah. That was with Mr. Harrison, the lead investor. I told you about it. Remember? I had to take him out. He's a big deal kind of guy. Likes the fancy places. You said you were with the team. I said. My voice quiet. You said your boss insisted. Well, yeah. The boss insisted I take the client out. He said quickly, his words slightly tripping over each other. It's the same thing. Mia. It was a work dinner. You know how these things are. You have to spend money to make money. It's all part of the game. He was trying to sound confident, breezy, but I could hear the strain underneath. A thin, high-wire tension. The receipt was for 2 people. Ben. 2 scallop dinners. A bottle of wine. My voice was barely a whisper. I felt pathetic, like a detective in a bad movie, listing off clues that only confirmed my own heartbreak. He sighed, a sound of pure exasperation that cut me deeper than any shout. Mia, what is this? An interrogation. Yes. It was me and the client. What am I supposed to do? Order him a salad? The guy is old school. You wine and dine him. I don't know why I have to explain every line item on an expense report to you. I'm trying to close the biggest deal of my life here. For us. Can I please get a little trust? The words hit their mark. I felt a hot flush of shame. He was right. What was I doing? I was acting like a crazy, jealous wife. He was working, and I was at home, letting my imagination run wild, accusing him over a piece of paper. The client was probably a man in his 60s. The wine was just business. It was all business. You're right. I mumbled, feeling foolish. I'm sorry. I don't know. My mind has been all over the place lately. I'm sorry I bothered you. His tone softened instantly, the relief in his voice palpable. Hey. No. It's okay. I get it. You're pregnant. You're alone all week. It's hard. I'm the one who should be sorry. I'll be home soon. Okay. We'll have a good weekend. We'll go to that birthing class, and you can make fun of me when I have to practice breathing. I force a laugh. Okay. I love you. Mia. I love you too. I said. But after we hung up, the words tasted like ash in my mouth. I hadn't believed him. Not for 1 second. The explanation was plausible. Perfect even. But I knew his voice. I knew the cadence of his honesty and the slight, hurried rhythm of his lies. And he had been lying. I smoothed the receipt out one last time and then, with a shaking hand, I folded it into a tiny square and tucked it into the back of my jewelry box. A small paper bomb. Waiting. When Ben got home that night, he was the image of the perfect, doting husband. He brought me a bouquet of my favorite flowers, stargazer lilies, and a pint of the expensive ice cream I was craving. He kissed me deeply, his hand going to my belly. How are my boys doing? He asked, his smile wide and bright. It felt practiced. We're good, I said, trying to smile back, trying to match his energy. But I felt like I was watching him through a pane of thick glass. He was here, but he wasn't. Some essential part of him was still 160 miles away, in a fancy restaurant with a bottle of wine and a plate of scallops. The weekend was a performance. We went to the birthing class, and I laughed on cue as he fumbled with a doll, pretending to change its diaper. We went for a walk in the park. We cooked dinner together. We did all the things that normal, happy couples did. But a heavy silence had settled between us. A silence made of all the things I wasn't asking, and all the things he wasn't telling me. At night, I lay awake in our bed, listening to the sound of his steady breathing beside me. He would fall asleep instantly, the sleep of the exhausted or the unbothered. I would lie there for hours, my mind replaying our phone call, dissecting every word, every pause. Who was she? Was she beautiful? Did he love her? The questions were a poison, seeping into the foundations of the life I had so carefully built. I would reach out my hand, hovering it just above his shoulder, wanting to touch him, to feel the familiar warmth of his skin. But I couldn't. He felt like a stranger, and I was lonelier lying next to him than I had ever been when I was sleeping in this bed alone. The weeks that followed were a quiet, agonizing blur. I lived with a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, a feeling like holding your breath underwater, waiting for the moment you have to break the surface. Ben's trips home became our new normal. He would arrive on Friday night armed with gifts and apologies for his long hours, and leave on Sunday evening with promises to call more often. He played the part of the devoted husband flawlessly. He would rub my swollen feet, assemble the baby's crib with painstaking focus, and talk to my belly, telling Noah stories about the baseball team he would one day play for. Part of me, the desperate, hopeful part, wanted to believe it was all in my head. I would watch him, searching his face for any sign of guilt or deceit. But he was a placid lake. His expression was open. His smile was ready. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the stress of the pregnancy was making me paranoid. I tried to push the receipt from the Gilded Sparrow to the back of my mind. It was a single anomaly. A piece of a puzzle that didn't fit. Maybe if I ignored it, it would disappear. But the doubt was a persistent weed, pushing its way through the cracks in my carefully constructed reality. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Or perhaps things I had chosen not to see. He had a new passcode on his phone. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said it was a new company security policy. He started talking about a colleague named Chloe more often. Chloe thinks we should use a different supplier for the steel frames. Chloe found an error in the schematics that saved us a fortune. Her name was woven into the fabric of his work stories so naturally that at first, I didn't think twice. She was just another name, like Dave from accounting or Sarah from HR. But the way he said her name was different. There was a lightness to it, an unconscious admiration that was missing when he talked about anyone else. She wasn't just a colleague. She was an ally, a confidant. She was the one who understood the pressure he was under, the one who was in the trenches with him. I was just the wife at home, a voice on the phone who talked about painkillers and prenatal vitamins. The baby shower was supposed to be a happy day. My sister and my best friend, Clara, had planned it for weeks. The house was filled with pastel-colored balloons, cheerful chatter, and a mountain of beautifully wrapped gifts. It was a celebration of the new life we were about to bring into the world. But to me, it felt like a sham. I sat on a chair that had been designated the throne of honor, smiling until my cheeks ached, opening tiny onesies and miniature socks, all while a cold dread pooled in my stomach. Ben was supposed to be there. He had promised. He had sworn he would move heaven and earth to be there. It was his last chance to be at a major milestone before the birth. But on Thursday night, 2 days before the party, he had called with the inevitable news. "Mia, I'm so sorry," he begun. And my heart had sunk before he even finished the sentence. The main contractor just walked off the job. It's a complete crisis. My boss is flying in from New York. I have to be here this weekend. There's no way I can leave. The excuse was so dramatic, so airtight, that I couldn't even argue. It was the perfect corporate catastrophe. I just murmured, "Okay, Ben, I understand." What else could I say? He was working. He was providing. This was his job. But as I sat there, surrounded by friends and family, unwrapping a diaper bag that Ben and I had picked out together, his absence was a physical presence in the room, a gaping hole in the middle of our supposed-to-be perfect life. Clara, who had known me since we were 5 and could read my moods better than I could myself, cornered me in the kitchen while I was cutting the cake. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. She didn't buy my bright, brittle smile for a second. "I'm fine," I said, my voice too high-pitched. "Just tired. You know, being a giant human incubator is exhausting." She leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "It's Ben, isn't it? This is the 3rd weekend in a row he's had to work late or cancel." I focused on slicing the cake into perfectly even pieces. "It's a really important project, Clara. The pressure is insane." I was defending him, and the words tasted like lies. "A project is a project, Mia. But your wife's baby shower only happens once. Some things should be more important." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. I blinked them back fiercely. I would not cry. Not today. "He feels terrible about it," I whispered. Clara put a gentle hand on my arm. "I'm sure he does. I just worry about you. All alone here." I forced another smile. "I'm not alone. I have you. Now, let's go feed these people some cake before they start a riot." That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, filled with the ghosts of laughter and a landscape of baby gear, Ben called. His face on the video screen was a mask of contrition. "How was it? Did you get lots of nice things? I feel like the biggest jerk on the planet for not being there." "It was nice," I said, my voice flat. I was too tired to pretend anymore. I panned the camera around the living room. showing him the miniature cradle, the high chair, the stacks of books and clothes. You were missed. I know. I know. Baby. I promise. I will make it up to you, he said. His eyes looked sincere. For a moment, I almost believed him. As soon as this project is over, it's just going to be you, me, and Noah. No more distractions. I promise. When will it be over? Ben, I asked, and the question hung in the air between us, heavy and unanswered. Soon, he said vaguely. Very soon. My due date came and went. The days stretched on, each one feeling longer than the last. I was heavy and uncomfortable, a ship waiting for a tide that would not turn. I spent my days walking endless laps around the neighborhood, trying to coax the baby out. My nights were sleepless, filled with a mixture of anticipation for the baby and a gnawing dread about my marriage. It happened on a Tuesday night. I had just finished a bland dinner of chicken and rice when the first cramp hit. Low and deep. It was different from the Braxton Hicks contractions I'd been having. This one had an edge to it, a seriousness that made me stop and catch my breath. I waited. 20 minutes later, another one came. Stronger this time. This was it. My hands started to shake as I dialed Ben's number. He had promised, over and over, that when the time came, he would drop everything. He had his hospital bag packed in his apartment. He had a full tank of gas in his car. The drive was just under 3 hours. He would make it. He had to. The phone rang. And rang. And rang. It went to voicemail. Hi. You've reached Ben Carter. Leave a message. My heart hammered against my ribs. Ben. It's me. I think it's starting. The contractions are about 20 minutes apart. You need to come home now. Call me as soon as you get this. My voice was trembling. I called again. Straight to voicemail. And again. Voicemail. Panic began to set in. Cold and sharp. His phone was off. Or he was ignoring my calls. Which was worse? I tried to stay calm. I followed the instructions from our birthing class. I breathed. I timed the contractions. They were getting closer. 15 minutes apart. Then 10. The pain was intensifying, wrapping around my back and squeezing my abdomen in a relentless grip. I called my sister, my voice cracking with pain and fear. It's happening. I cried. And I can't reach Ben. Her voice was a calm anchor in my storm. Okay. Honey. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Have you called your doctor? Yes. She said to wait until they're 5 minutes apart and then come in. Okay. We can do this. Mia. Just breathe. I'm coming. Hanging up. I felt a wave of despair so profound it almost brought me to my knees. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Ben was supposed to be here, holding my hand, timing my contractions, telling me I was strong. We had a plan. We had a playlist of songs for the delivery room. We had practiced this. But the stage was set. The curtain was rising. And my co-star was missing. I sent Ben one last text. My fingers fumbling on the screen as another contraction seized me. Hospital. Contractions are 5 minutes apart. Please. Where are you? I stared at the screen, praying for the 3 little dots to appear, indicating he was typing a reply. Nothing. The message sat there, under his name. Delivered. But not read. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and hushed, urgent voices. My sister, Sarah, was a steady presence beside me, her hand gripping mine as a wave of pain crashed over me. She answered the nurse's questions, filled out the paperwork, and relayed information to her parents. She was my rock. But every time I looked at her, I felt a fresh pang of shame. She was supposed to be the excited auntie-to-be, not the stand-in husband. They settled me into a delivery room that felt cold and sterile. The minutes stretched into hours. Each contraction was a mountain I had to climb. And with each one, the hope that Ben would burst through the door, full of apologies and relief, dwindled a little more. I checked my phone between the waves of pain, my thumb hovering over his name. The text message remained unread. My calls went straight to voicemail. He had vanished. It was as if he had ceased to exist. The nurses were kind but professionally detached. One of them, a woman named Linda with warm eyes, asked, "Is your husband on his way?" Honey. Tears I hadn't realized I was holding back began to stream down my face. I can't reach him. I choked out. The words a raw confession of my failure. His phone must be off. Linda patted my hand. I'm sure he'll get here as soon as he can. Don't you worry. Just focus on you and this baby. That's all that matters right now. But it wasn't all that mattered. His absence was a betrayal so deep it felt like a physical part of the labor. With every excruciating squeeze in my abdomen, there was a corresponding twist of my heart. The pain of childbirth was immense, but the pain of being so utterly alone was worse. This was the moment we had planned for, dreamed of. This was the pinnacle of our love story, the creation of our family. And I was living it by myself. As the night wore on, the pain became all-consuming. There was no room left for hope or worry. Only the primal, overwhelming task of bringing my son into the world. The doctor, a calm and reassuring woman named Dr. Miller, guided me with a steady voice. Sarah was there, whispering encouragement, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. And through the haze of agony, I pushed through the pain, through the fear, through the heartbreak. I pushed for my son. And then, suddenly, the pressure was gone. It was replaced by a cry, a thin, reedy wail that was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. He's here. Mia, Dr. Miller announced, her voice full of joy. You have a beautiful baby boy. They laid him on my chest. A tiny, wriggling creature, impossibly small and perfect. He had a shock of dark hair, just like Ben's. His eyes, when he finally opened them, were a deep, soulful blue. I looked at him, and the world outside the two of us simply fell away. The cold hospital room, the missing husband, the shattered promise, none of it mattered. All that existed was the fierce, protective, all-encompassing love I felt for this little person. My son. Noah. You did it, Sarah whispered, her eyes shining with tears. I had done it. A wave of exhaustion and profound relief washed over me. I had survived. We had survived. It wasn't until the next morning, as I lay in the recovery room watching the sun cast long shadows across the floor, that the reality of the situation came crashing back down. Noah was sleeping peacefully in the clear plastic bassinet beside my bed. He was real. And Ben was still gone. My phone, which had been silent all night, finally buzzed on the bedside table. It was a text from Ben. My heart leaped. A foolish, reflexive jump of hope. Oh my God. Mia. My phone died. I just saw your messages. Is everything okay? Are you okay? Is the baby here? The words were a flurry of panic, but they felt hollow. Rehearsed. My phone died. The oldest, flimsiest excuse in the book. Fury, cold and clean, sliced through my exhaustion. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message, the lie burning on the screen. A few minutes later, he called. I let it ring, watching his picture flash on the screen, a photo of us from our honeymoon, smiling and carefree. We looked like two different people. Finally, I answered, my voice devoid of all emotion. Hello, Ben. Mia. Thank God. I've been going out of my mind. What happened? Are you in labor? Where are you? The labor is over. Ben. I said, my voice as flat and gray as a winter sky. Your son was born at 3:17 this morning. He weighs 7 pounds, 3 ounces. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, a choked sound. He's here? Already? Oh my God. Is he okay? Are you okay? We're fine. I said. The word felt like a lie. I was not fine. I was shattered into a million pieces. But I would not give him the satisfaction of hearing me cry. No thanks to you. Mia. I am so sorry. My phone died. I swear. I was working late on the crisis at the site. I passed out on the couch in my office, and I didn't even realize his words tumbled out. A frantic, desperate attempt to patch a hole the size of the Grand Canyon. Save it, I said. Cutting him off. Just save it. It doesn't matter anymore. Of course it matters. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 3 hours. I'm so sorry. Baby. Please. Believe me. I didn't say anything. I just disconnected the call and dropped the phone onto the blanket. I looked over at Noah, my perfect, innocent son, and I made a silent promise to him. I would protect him. I would be enough for him. I had to be. Ben arrived 3 hours later, just as he promised. He burst into the room, his hair a mess, his clothes rumpled. He was holding a giant teddy bear and a bouquet of wilting gas station flowers. He looked wild-eyed and genuinely distraught. A year ago, I would have melted with sympathy. Now, I felt nothing. It was like watching a stranger in a movie. His eyes fell on the bassinet, and his frantic energy seemed to dissolve. He approached it slowly, cautiously, as if it were a holy shrine. He peered down at his son, and his face crumpled. Real tears streamed down his cheeks. "He's so small," he whispered, reaching a hesitant finger out to touch Noah's tiny hand. I watched him, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. He cried. He apologized over and over again. He told me how much he loved me, how sorry he was that he had missed the most important moment of our lives. He swore his phone had died. He swore he had fallen asleep from exhaustion. He swore it would never happen again. I let him talk. I nodded in all the right places. I let him hold his son. I even let him kiss my forehead. I played the part of the tired, forgiving new mother. Because in that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, that I would never, ever believe another word he said. And second, that our marriage was over. It hadn't ended with a fight or a dramatic confrontation. It had ended silently, in the middle of the night, in a sterile hospital room where a woman gave birth to her son all by herself. For the next 2 days in the hospital, we were a picture of a happy new family. Ben was attentive, changing diapers, fetching me water, and holding Noah with a look of pure adoration. The nurses cooed over what a wonderful, hands-on dad he was. Our parents came to visit, beaming with pride. Everyone saw the beautiful surface. No one saw the gaping cracks underneath. I smiled. I accepted the compliments, and I waited. I was biding my time, gathering my strength. The fight was yet to come. But I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I was no longer fighting for my marriage. I was fighting for my son. And for myself. Going home was the strangest part. We walked through the front door, Ben carrying Noah carefully in his car seat, me following slowly, my body aching. The house was exactly as I had left it, but it felt entirely different. The sunny, yellow nursery I had painted with so much love now seemed garishly bright, a monument to a naive dream. The whole house felt like a stage set for a play that had been cancelled. We were actors going through the motions, reciting lines from a script that no longer made sense. Ben was a model of paternal devotion. He insisted on taking the night shifts, even though he had to drive back to Charlotte the next day. He would walk the floors with a crying Noah, shushing him gently, his voice a low, soothing murmur in the dark. He would look at me with eyes full of a pleading sort of tenderness, as if his good behavior could somehow erase the past few days. "Go back to sleep, Mia," he'd whisper. "I've got him. You need to rest." I let him. I lay in our bed, listening to the sounds of my husband caring for my son, and felt a profound and unsettling detachment. This was the life I had wanted, the partnership I had craved. But it was a lie. His kindness felt like a performance, his attentiveness a form of penance. And underneath it all, the silence between us grew heavier, thick with unspoken accusations and unanswered questions. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It arrived in the quiet stillness of a Tuesday afternoon. 2 weeks after Noah was born, Ben had gone back to Charlotte, promising to be home for good in just a couple more weeks. I was exhausted, running on a chaotic cycle of 2-hour naps. Noah was fussy, and I was trying to soothe him, pacing the living room with him nestled against my chest. My laptop was open on the coffee table, a forgotten portal to the outside world, and a mail notification popped up on the screen. It was a shared photo album notification from a name I vaguely recognized on one of Ben's colleagues, from the Charlotte office. The subject line was, "Fun times at the Q3 project celebration." Curiosity, a cold and unwelcome companion, got the better of me. I clicked the link. A gallery of photos opened up. There were dozens of pictures of Ben's team, all smiling, drinking, and celebrating at a fancy bar. They all looked so happy, so carefree. And then I saw it. The picture was near the end of the album. It was a candid shot, slightly out of focus, taken in a dimly lit corner. Ben was in it. He was laughing, his head tilted back. A woman was standing beside him, her face turned up towards his. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair and a vibrant smile. Her hand was resting on his arm, casually, intimately, and Ben's arm was around her waist. His hand splayed possessively on her hip. They looked like a couple. They looked like they belonged together. I zoomed in on her face. Her name tag was just visible on her blazer. Chloe. The air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. My vision tunneled. The cheerful, sunlit living room seemed to fade to gray at the edges. It wasn't just a receipt anymore. It wasn't just a suspicion. It was here. It was real. A photograph. A single, damning frame that confirmed every fear I had tried so desperately to suppress. My blood ran cold. I looked at the date the photo was taken. It was the night Noah was born. The night Ben's phone had died. The night he had passed out from exhaustion in his office. He hadn't been in his office. He had been here. At this party. With her. While I was in agony. Bringing his son into the world. He was laughing. His arm around another woman. A wave of nausea washed over me. I stumbled to the couch and sat down heavily. Clutching Noah so tightly he let out a small whimper of protest. I loosened my grip. My hands trembling. I stared at the photo. Memorizing every detail. The way her fingers curled around his bicep. The way his smile was just for her. The betrayal was so absolute. So monumental. That I couldn't even cry. I felt a strange, terrifying calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes after a devastating storm. When the world is flattened and silent. I knew what I had to do. There was no more waiting. No more hoping. No more pretending. I waited until that evening. I fed Noah. Bathed him. And rocked him to sleep in his pale yellow room. I laid him gently in his crib. Watching the soft rise and fall of his chest. He was so perfect. So innocent. He deserved better than a life built on a foundation of lies. He deserved a mother who was whole. Not one who was slowly being eaten alive by doubt and sorrow. I went back into the living room and sat on the couch. The laptop still open to that picture. I picked up my phone. I didn't call then. I didn't want to hear his voice. His lies. His excuses. I did something much simpler. I took a screenshot of the photo. And I sent it to him. I didn't add any words. The picture said everything. For a long time. There was no response. The 3 little dots didn't appear. I imagined him seeing it. The jolt of panic. The frantic scramble for an explanation. The sickening realization that he had been caught. Then, his name flashed on my screen. He was calling. I stared at it. My heart a dull, heavy drum in my chest. I declined the call. He called again immediately. I declined it again. A flurry of text followed. Mia, please answer. It's not what you think. Let me explain. Please, baby. Don't do this. The words were meaningless. Pathetic. I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in months. Power. The power of the truth. He could no longer hide. I laid my phone face down on the table. I didn't want to see his name. His please. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out a photo album from our wedding. I opened it. Looking at the pictures of the 2 of us. We were so young. So full of hope. The bride and groom in the photos were strangers to me now. Their happiness felt like a story about someone else. I closed the album and put it away. I didn't need to look at it anymore. The past was a closed book. I finally picked up the phone when he called for the 10th time. I didn't say hello. I just waited. Mia. His voice was a wreck. Thick with panic. Mia. Thank God. Listen to me. That picture, it's a misunderstanding. It was a work party. We all had a few drinks. It meant nothing. I was silent. I let his words hang in the air, hollow and weightless. Chloe is just a friend. He continued, his voice cracking. A colleague. That's all. I swear. It was a stupid, drunken mistake to even let her get that close. It meant nothing. Mia. Nothing. I finally spoke. And my voice was a stranger's. Cold and clear and steady. Was it a misunderstanding when you told me your phone was dead? Ben. There was a pause. What? The night Noah was born. You were at that party. You weren't in your office. You weren't exhausted. You were celebrating. With her. I said the words calmly. One after another. Each one a perfectly aimed stone. A choke sound came from his end of the line. He was caught. There was no way out. I was going to leave. He stammered. I just stopped by for a few minutes to show my face. Then my phone died. I swear. Stop. I said. The word was quiet, but it had the force of a physical blow. Just stop lying. I'm so tired of the lies. I could hear him crying now. Desperate. Ugly sobs. I'm sorry. He wept. Mia. I am so sorry. I messed up. I know I messed up. But I love you. I love you and Noah more than anything. Please. We can fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll come home right now. Whatever it takes. I thought of him laughing in that picture. I thought of myself, alone and terrified in the delivery room. I thought of my son, who came into a world where his father was in absence, a lie, and I looked at the beautiful, smiling moon I had painted on the nursery wall. I had wanted it to be a symbol of peaceful dreams, but now it just looked lonely in a sky full of fake stars. Why, Ben? I asked, and the question wasn't angry. It was just empty. I just want to know why. He was silent for a long moment, the only sound his ragged breathing. And then he finally gave me the one thing he had left to give. The truth. I was scared. He whispered, his voice broken. I was terrified. Of being a father. Of the responsibility. Of not being good enough. And Chloe, she didn't need anything from me. It was easy. With her. I wasn't about to become a dad. I was just Ben. It was cowardly. And it was unforgivable. I know that. His confession didn't make me feel better. It didn't make me feel anything at all. It was just information. A final, sad detail in the autopsy of our marriage. I see. I said. Please, Mia, don't hang up. Let's talk about this. Let me come home. You are home. Ben, I said quietly. You're in Charlotte. That's your home now. And before he could reply, before he could plead or promise or lie one more time, I ended the call. I turned my phone off and set it on the table. The silence that filled the house was no longer heavy or suffocating. It was clean. It was clear. It was mine. The days that followed the phone call were a strange, hollow limbo. Ben didn't come home. He seemed to understand that his presence would be an intrusion, a violation of the fragile peace I was trying to build. He respected the boundary I had drawn. But he didn't disappear. Instead, my phone was flooded with a constant stream of messages. Long, rambling texts at 3 a.m, filled with regret and self-loathing. Short, pathetic pleas in the middle of the day. Are you and Noah okay? I miss you. I'll do anything. I read them with a clinical detachment, like a doctor examining a patient's chart. They were symptoms of his guilt, not expressions of a love I could still recognize. He also started sending money. Large, anonymous wire transfers appeared in my bank account, far more than we had ever budgeted for. It was his only way to connect, his only way to feel like he was still providing. At first, I wanted to send it back out of pride, but practicality won. I had a son to care for. I was no longer a wife, but I was a mother, and a mother's first duty is to her child's survival. So I used the money to buy diapers, to pay the mortgage on the house that now felt like a gilded cage, and to keep the lights on. The house itself became my world. I rarely left, except for walks around the block with Noah nestled in his stroller. The outside world felt too loud, too bright, too full of happy families that served as painful reminders of my own failure. My friends called, but I let the calls go to voicemail. I didn't have the energy to explain, to recount the sordid details, to see the pity in their eyes. I was a ship that had been torpedoed, and I was taking on water fast. All my energy was focused on one thing, keeping my son afloat. Noah was my anchor. He was the one solid, true thing in my life. I poured all of my fractured love into him. I would spend hours just watching him sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling, his face so peaceful and untroubled. I would sing him the lullabies my mother used to sing to me, my voice often cracking with unshed tears. In his deep blue eyes, I saw a future. It wasn't the future I had planned, but it was a future nonetheless. He was my reason to get out of bed in the morning, my reason to eat when I had no appetite, my reason to breathe when my lungs felt tight with grief. My first trip out into the real world was for Noah's 2-month checkup. The thought of facing a waiting room full of people filled me with a paralyzing anxiety. But I couldn't put it off. I dressed us both carefully, as if we were wearing costumes for a play called Everything is Fine. The pediatrician's office was bright and chaotic, filled with the sounds of crying babies and cheerful nurses. I held Noah close, my protective shield against the world. When our name was called, we were led into an examination room where we met Dr. David Chen. He had a kind, gentle face and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wasn't our usual doctor, who was on vacation. Dr. Chen was wonderful with Noah, his movements calm and confident as he checked his heart, his reflexes, his hearing. He spoke to Noah in a soft, cooing voice, and Noah, who was usually fussy around strangers, seemed to relax under his touch. After the examination, as I was buttoning up Noah's onesie, Dr. Chen sat on his stool and looked at me. his expression warm but perceptive. "He's a beautiful, healthy boy," he said. "You're doing a great job, Mom." The simple, unprompted praise was so unexpected it felt like a physical touch. My carefully constructed composure began to crumble. "Thank you," I managed to whisper, my voice thick. He didn't pry, but his gaze was full of an empathy that went beyond professional courtesy. "The first few months are the hardest," he said softly. "It's a huge adjustment. It can feel isolating, especially if you're doing it on your own." He said the last words as a simple statement of fact, not a question, and it gave me permission to be honest. A single tear escaped and rolled down my cheek. I quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. "Is it that obvious?" He offered a small, sad smile. "My wife passed away a few years ago, when our daughter was just a toddler. I learned to recognize the look. It's a specific kind of tired, the kind that has nothing to do with a lack of sleep." His quiet confession opened a door between us. He wasn't just a doctor. He was a fellow traveler on a difficult road. He understood loss. He understood single parenthood. For the first time in months, I felt seen. "My husband and we separated," I said, the words coming out in a rush before I could stop them. "Right after Noah was born." He just nodded, his expression full of a deep, quiet understanding. "I'm very sorry to hear that. That's a heavy burden to carry on top of everything else. Please, if you ever feel overwhelmed, or if you just need to talk to someone who gets it, my office can always reach me. And there are support groups. They can be a real lifeline." He wasn't offering a solution or a platitude. He was offering a handhold, a small point of light in my vast darkness. I left the clinic that day feeling a tiny bit lighter. The encounter was a reminder that kindness still existed in the world, that compassion could be found in the most unexpected places. The encounter with Dr. Chen planted a seed. He had seen me, not as a victim, but as a mother doing her best under difficult circumstances. And he had reminded me that I wasn't the only person in the world who had ever felt this way. Slowly, tentatively, I began to reach out. I called Clara back and, through tears, told her everything. She didn't say "I told you so." She just listened. And then she showed up at my door an hour later with a bag of groceries and a determination to get me out of the house. I started taking Noah for longer walks, venturing to the park at the edge of our neighborhood. It was there, a few weeks later, that I saw a familiar face. Dr. Chen was on the swings with a little girl who had his same kind eyes and a cascade of dark pigtails. He saw me and smiled. A genuine, welcoming smile. "Amelia, right?" he said, walking over as his daughter continued to swing. "And Noah. It's good to see you both out and about." "Dr. Chen. David." I corrected myself, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "This is a surprise. We live just a few blocks from here," he said. "This is our weekend spot." He gestured toward his daughter. "That's Lily." We fell into an easy conversation. We talked about the challenges of getting a toddler to eat her vegetables, and the miracle of a baby sleeping through the night. We talked about the park, the weather, the changing seasons. It was all wonderfully, blessedly normal. There was no tension, no hidden agenda. It was just a single parents, sharing a moment of quiet camaraderie under the autumn sky. He didn't mention my situation, and I didn't mention his loss. We didn't need to. The understanding was already there, a silent foundation beneath our simple words. As I walked home that afternoon, pushing Noah's stroller, I realized something profound. My life had been defined for so long by the absence of Ben. But for the first time, I felt the presence of a new, unexpected friendship, the presence of a possibility I hadn't dared to imagine, the possibility that my story wasn't over. The chapter with Ben had closed, but maybe, just maybe, a new one was beginning to write itself. The friendship with David grew as the autumn leaves turned from green to gold and then to brown. Our meetings in the park became a regular weekend occurrence, an unspoken appointment. We'd walk the winding paths, me pushing Noah's stroller, him trying to keep up with Lily's boundless energy as she chased squirrels or collected fallen leaves. Our conversations were easy, flowing from the mundane details of parenting to deeper, more thoughtful topics. He told me about his wife, Sarah, about her laugh and her love for hiking. He spoke of her not with the raw, open wound of fresh grief, but with a gentle, bittersweet fondness. He was a man who had made peace with his past, even if the scars remained. In turn, I found myself opening up about Ben. Not with the anger and bitterness that had consumed me for months, but with a quiet, analytical sadness. Talking to David was like talking to a mirror that didn't judge. He just listened. His head tilted slightly. His gaze full of a profound, unpitying empathy. It's okay to be angry. You know, he told me one crisp afternoon as we sat on a bench, watching Lily teach a delighted Noah how to pat a dog. And it's okay to be sad. Sometimes at the same time. Grief isn't a straight line. He called what I was feeling grief. And the word resonated with a deep, startling truth. I wasn't just getting over a breakup. I was grieving the death of a future. I was mourning the man I thought I had married. The life I thought we would have. Naming it gave it shape. Made it feel less like a formless, overwhelming fog. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started to heal. The healing didn't come in a sudden flash of light, but in small, everyday moments. It was in the first time I laughed. A real, belly-deep laugh. At one of Lily's silly jokes. It was in the afternoon I pulled out my old sketch pad and charcoals and, for the first time in over a year, felt the urge to draw something other than a cartoon moon. I drew Noah's sleeping face. The perfect curve of his cheek. The tiny bow of his lips. My hand still knew what to do. The artist in me, the woman I was before I became a wife, wasn't gone. She had just been dormant. I started taking on small freelance graphic design projects. Things I could do from home while Noah napped. My old art teacher credentials helped me land a gig designing brochures for a local community center. It wasn't much, but the first paycheck I earned, the first money that wasn't a guilt-ridden transfer from Ben, felt like a declaration of independence. I was providing for my son. I was standing on my own 2 feet. Ben, meanwhile, was a ghost in the machine of my life. His texts became less frequent, his desperate pleas replaced by a resigned sadness. He asked for pictures of Noah, and I sent them, keeping my replies brief and polite. He was Noah's father, and I would never deny him that. But he was no longer my husband, no longer my concern. The emotional tether that had bound me to him for so long had finally frayed and snapped. His project in Charlotte ended. He sent me a short text, "It's done. I'm moving back to Raleigh this weekend." My heart didn't leap. It didn't sink. It barely registered. It was just a piece of information. Around the same time, Chloe, the other woman, sent me an email. I stared at her name in my inbox for a full day before I had the courage to open it. The message was short and surprisingly sincere. "Amelia," it began, "I know you have no reason to listen to anything I have to say, and I don't expect your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that Ben and I are no longer together. What he and I had, it wasn't real. It wasn't escape. He was running from a life he was scared of, and I was foolish enough to be his hiding place. He never stopped loving you. He talked about you all the time. I am truly sorry for the pain I helped cause. I hope one day you and your son find all the happiness you deserve." I read the email twice. There was no triumph, no satisfaction in knowing their relationship had failed. There was only a profound, weary sadness for all of us, for the mess we had made. Ben hadn't been choosing her over me. He had been choosing an easy fantasy over a difficult reality. And in the end, reality always wins. I deleted the email and didn't reply. Her apology was for her, not for me. My peace didn't depend on her words. A week later, Ben asked if he could see Noah. It was the first time he had asked to see him in person since he'd moved back. I hesitated, then agreed. We decided to meet at the park, neutral territory. When I saw him walking toward our bench, my breath caught. He looked diminished. He had lost weight, and the confident, easygoing swagger he once had was gone, replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. He looked older, tired, and deeply sad. The anger I once felt was gone, replaced by a strange, distant pity. He didn't try to hug me. He just gave me a small, pained smile. "Hi, Mia." "Hi, Ben." His eyes went straight to Noah, who was sitting up in his stroller, babbling happily at a bird. Ben's face softened, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I had married. The love he had for his son was real. It was perhaps the only real thing left between us. "Can I?" he asked, his voice thick. I nodded. Unbuckling the stroller, he lifted Noah out, holding him with an awkward tenderness, as if he were made of glass. He just stood there for a long time, looking at his son's face, his own expression a mixture of awe and profound regret. "He has your eyes," Ben whispered. "I know," I said quietly. We spent an hour like that. He played with Noah, pushing him gently in the baby swing, making silly faces that earned him a gummy, drooling smile. I watched them from a distance, a gatekeeper to a life he had forfeited. He was a good father in that moment. He was present. He was loving. But he was a visitor. This was my life. Noah's and mine. He was just passing through. Before he left, he turned to me, his eyes pleading. Mia, I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to figure myself out, to understand why I did what I did. I'm not asking for you back. I know I destroyed that. I'm just asking for forgiveness, and for a chance to be a real father to our son. I looked at him, the man who was both a stranger and the most familiar person in the world to me. I thought of the long, lonely nights, the soul-crushing betrayal, the grief that had almost drowned me. And I thought of the peace I had found, the strength I had discovered, the new friendships that had held me up. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about letting myself go. I forgive you, Ben, I said. And the words felt lighter than I ever imagined they could. They weren't a gift I was giving him. They were a weight I was setting down. A heavy suitcase I had been dragging behind me for almost a year. I forgave you a while ago. I think. Not because you deserved it, but because Noah and I deserve to live without the anger. We deserve peace. Relief washed over his face, so profound it was almost painful to watch. Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them back. Thank you, Mia, he whispered. That means more than you know. You can be a part of Noah's life. I continued, my voice steady and clear, drawing a boundary as clean and sharp as a line in the sand. You're his father. He deserves to know you. We can arrange weekends, holidays. We can be civil. We can be good co-parents. But that's all we can be. The story of you and me, that story is over. He nodded, accepting my terms with a solemn grace. He knew he had no ground to bargain. I understand, he said. I'll be whatever you'll let me be. A good dad. I promise. I won't let him down again. He handed a sleeping Noah back to me, his fingers brushing mine for a fleeting second. There was no spark, no ghost of the old connection. It felt like touching a stranger. He watched as I carefully buckled Noah into his stroller. Then, with one last, long look at his son, he turned and walked away. I didn't watch him go. I turned the stroller around and started the walk home, toward my future, not away from my past. The months that followed settled into a new kind of rhythm, a new definition of family. Ben was true to his word. He became a consistent, reliable presence in Noah's life. Every other weekend, he would pick him up, and I would watch from the window as my son's face lit up at the sight of his dad. He sent photos from their adventures at the zoo, the science museum, the local duck pond. He was building a new relationship with his son, one brick at a time, and I was grateful for it. Our interactions were polite, focused entirely on Noah's well-being. We were business partners in the most important venture of our lives. The passion and the pain were gone, leaving only a quiet, functional respect. My life, meanwhile, was blooming in ways I never expected. My freelance design work grew, and I converted the spare bedroom one I had once imagined would be a playroom into a small, sunlit studio. It was my space, filled with my art, my ideas, my ambition. I was no longer just a mother. I was a creator, a business owner. I was Amelia Evans again. And then there was David. Our friendship deepened through the winter. A slow, gentle thaw. We helped each other through the small crises of single parenthood, last-minute babysitting, fevers in the middle of the night, advice on toddler tantrums. His daughter, Lily, and Noah became inseparable. A tiny, giggling duo. He and Lily became a part of my weekend routine, as familiar and comforting as the morning sun. One evening in early spring, he invited the three of us over for dinner. It was the first time I had been to his house. It was warm and lived in, filled with Lily's artwork taped to the fridge and stacks of books on every surface. It felt like a home. After we put the kids to bed, we sat on his back porch, drinking tea under a sky full of stars. The air was soft, smelling of damp earth and new blossoms. You seem happy, Mia, he said, his voice quiet in the comfortable darkness. I considered his words. Happy. It was a feeling that had seemed so alien, so unattainable for so long. But now, as I thought about it, I realized it was true. I am, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. It's a different kind of happy than I expected my life to have. It's quieter, more peaceful. It's a happiness I built myself, not one I was waiting for someone else to give me. He reached across the small table and gently took my hand. His touch was warm and steady. It wasn't a gesture of possession or passion, but of simple, profound connection. That's the best kind of happiness there is, he said. We sat there in silence for a while, his hand holding mine, the stars watching over us. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic promises. There didn't need to be. We were two people who had navigated the wreckage of our past and found our way to this quiet shore. We knew that love wasn't about perfect beginnings, but about the courage to start again. The next morning, I was in my studio, sketching out a new logo design. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, just as it had in the nursery on that day that felt like a lifetime ago. But they no longer looked like tiny, glittering stars of a fragile dream. They were just particles of light, illuminating the real, tangible world around me. Noah, now a sturdy toddler, was playing on a mat on the floor, happily stacking wooden blocks. He would build a tower, watch it tumble, and then, with a determined giggle, he would immediately start building it again. I smiled, watching him. We were both builders, my son and I, rebuilding from the rubble. My phone chimed. It was a picture message from David, a photo of a single, perfect rose from his garden, dew-covered and glowing in the morning light. The caption was simple, "Good morning." I looked from the rose on my screen to my son on the floor, to the work spread out on my desk. My heart felt full, not with the frantic, anxious love of my past, but with a deep, calm, and steady sense of gratitude. The cracks in my life had not been erased. The scars were still there, but I finally understood. The cracks were not the end of the story. They were just the places where the light got in, and my life, once plunged into darkness, was now, finally, full of light.